Good morning, members of the MAG 911 Study Committee. This meeting is now called to order. For those around the table, please turn on your microphone when speaking. For those participating via Zoom, please state your name when making a comment or asking a question. The MAG public comment process allows members of the public to comment on items on today's agenda or on items that fall under MAG's jurisdiction. If you'd like to comment at today's meeting, please fill out a white request to speak card located on the information table and give it to MAG staff. If you parked in the garage, parking validators are available on the information table. If you purchase a transit ticket to come to the meeting, please see staff for a ticket. Hearing assisted devices are available from MAG staff. We will now begin the meeting with a roll call of all members. MAG staff, will you provide the roll call of members participating both in person and virtually?
Thank you, Chair. I will go through the list of members. When I call your name, please indicate you are present for the record. Dale Nanigay.
Present.
Thank you. Dan Cotterman.
Here.
Thank you. Joshua Wright. David Raymer. Co-Chair Phelps. Santiago Rodriguez.
Present virtually.
Thank you. Co-Chair Brady.
Here.
Thank you. Travis Cutright.
Here.
Thank you. Brittany Brunet.
Present.
Thank you. Scott Walker.
Present.
Thank you. Jesse Cooper.
Present.
Thank you. Bobo Kinski.
Present virtually.
Thank you. Karen Sutherland.
Present.
Thank you. Catherine Masters. Chair, we have a quorum.
Thank you. We'll now proceed to item number 2, which is call to the audience. Do you have any requests? Okay, we'll skip all over that then. Let's go to item 3, approval of the February 24th, 2023 MAG 911 Study Committee meetings. This item is approval of the February 21st, 2023 meeting minutes. Does any member of the committee have a question or comment on the minutes? Prior to approval of this item, do we have any members of the public who wish to comment on this item? Don't have any don't have any written comments, I'm assuming. All right, okay. All right, do we have a motion to approve these minutes? Motion. A motion from Travis. Do we have a second?
Second.
A second from Dan. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay? And staff will take a roll call of members participating virtually.
Thank you, Chair. When I call your name, please indicate how you vote. Santiago Rodriguez.
Aye.
Thank you. Bobo Kinski.
Aye.
Thank you. Chair, the motion has passed.
Thank you very much. We'll now proceed to item 4. We'll have Liz Graber give us an overview of potential impacts of PSAPs leaving MR 911. Go ahead, Liz.
Thank you. If we can go. So we've been notified through MAG of 4 agencies that have intentions of leaving the region. And approximate dates of what they are. Wickenburg, they're waiting on the vendor, so that's why they don't have a specific date of when they can cut over. They're going to a new building, so best we can pinpoint it is spring of 2023. I reached out to their chief last week and he couldn't give me a better date. Scottsdale, June 30th of 2023. Gilbert Police, similar to Wickenburg, is looking at October, but that is something that, depending on the vendor and their schedule, whether they'll be able to cut over at that time. And Paradise Valley is a date to be determined. They are also on waiting for the state's vendor to schedule them a slot of when they will go over. Next slide. So I was asked to give the operational impacts to the region with PSAPs leaving, and this is just a high level of what we came up with. The first things I wanted to emphasize is the transfers will not be impacted. We'll be able to, there's sometimes a rumor out there saying you won't be able to transfer 911. That is not the case. 911, we can transfer anywhere. So that will not be impacted. The PSAPs on the AT&T systems can use MR911 PSAPs as backups if they wish. It takes coordination with my team and AT&T, but that's something that's already in place now with Maricopa Police Department in Pinal County goes to Chandler. So that is something that can be handled as well. That won't go away. And then in the blue are the ones that are the things that we were able to speak to on what will be the impact. So one of the things that we've had since 2004 is the Community Emergency Notification System, or SANS, or Reverse 911. You might have heard of it. That is deployed through our network, so to the PSAPs. And so they'll have to, so in the case of, let's say, Gilbert and Chandler, there's something on the border that they need to do an emergency notification. 2 different emergency notifications will have to be deployed. Currently with us as a region, our Reverse 911 looks at us as one customer. So agencies have, if something's happening on the border, a police situation, they have the capability of notifying the neighboring agency residents as well. They notify the PSAP, say, hey, we've got a subject with a gun or whatever the instance may be, and it goes to both agencies without an issue. In this method, they're going to have to notify the PSAP, which they do anyway, and then they're going to have to deploy their own emergency notification. So not impossible, just a little more clunky and seamless like we're used to. PSAPs lose the ability to monitor all PSAP 911 call volumes through the MR 911 regional map. So all the PSAPs have at their call taking positions a 911 map that allows them to see the plotting of any wireless call and landline calls as well. But we have made the ability, since it is a regional map, that they, at a supervisor's position, they can turn on and see call volumes happening in other agencies. So for example, when you have a big event like we've had last February, different ones, they were able to monitor the traffic of those PSAPs that border or anything where they might be affected by the overflow. They also have the ability to do it if all of a sudden they start getting calls from a PSAP and they don't know why, and they can look and see, oh, they're inundated with calls, or they're not getting any calls and there's an issue. So it just gives that regional aspect that you'll be able to tell what kind of traffic agencies are going through. We also set up on that map a broadcast message. It's a scrolling message down at the bottom, and we use it when we need to blast out a message immediately, and it literally goes to all 400 map stations throughout the region, so they can see Chandler's inmate busy, or whatever the case, Scottsdale's evacuating, all those kind of things that they put out, so that they become situationally aware of what this PSAP's going through. So that also goes across our network to our maps, and that we lose that ability to do that region-wide. And they also lose the ability to load balance. This is something that we had set up with Scottsdale. We did a test with Scottsdale, Mesa, and Tempe on being able to load share 911 calls. Originally started as part of an answer to COVID. So if you have so many employees down and you need help answering your call volume, and you only have one person at work that's answering your calls, this allowed a round robin, however many you wanted, like every third, or however you wanted to set up to go to other PSAPs. So you're still taking calls for your PSAPs, but they're pitching in and taking those calls as well. So once that goes to the AT&T system, they won't be part of our regional load balancing. And the next slide. So there'll be fiscal changes. MR 911 will only apply for the state grant for those PSAPs in their system. And as an FYI, we sent out we have the notice of funding that came out last week, and we sent out messages to the PSAPs to see who we will be applying on their behalf. And so they're getting me their answers, so we know who will go directly to the state for funding on a grant and who will be part of our grant system. PSAPs choosing not to be part of the state will become their own system administrator. That's what they call my job, all my peers in the state. So then all of the agencies will go individually to the state for their grant funding. After their departure, all costs associated with PSAPs will be shifted to the member agency to manage. So when they started the grant system in fiscal year 2020, we were required to have everything go through our procurement system, ours being the contract agency, City of Phoenix. And we pay out and make all the original, pay the costs, and then we seek reimbursement from the state. So all those agencies their departure will do that individually. They'll no longer be part of our procurement system. And the annual 911 grant award for Maricopa region will be less due to departures of PSAP. So examples in fiscal year 2024, we have an upgrade for Gilbert, and we have an upgrade for Wickenburg. And since they're departing, those costs for those projects will be eliminated. The part where it's going to be a little tricky is as we still have to fund those that are leaving after the fiscal year, July 1st. So we still have to maintain, we still have to pay their monthly costs, everything that goes with that until they actually depart. So some of it's going to be crossover multi-fiscal years on between us and the state. So I don't know how they'll address that with the grant. And the next slide. So one of the big things that we have enjoyed as a region is when we added some new feature or 911 changed. A part of our public awareness campaign is we didn't want a citizen in Buckeye not to get what a citizen in Mesa was getting. So when we did the SENS Community Emergency Notification System in 2004, everybody in the region was turned on at the same time. Cell phone locations and capability, we did that in 2005. And once again, we did it as a region. Nobody was left out. SENS cell phone registration, the ability to register your cell phone. We broadcast that in 2009. And of course, the infamous text to 911. We did that as a whole region 2018. And then when we did a campaign on supplemental data on smartphone, the Uber location and the different things that come across to the 911 operator, that also went in 2018. So it's not that it can't be coordinated. Once again, I use the word clunky, it'll be a little clunky. So as a region, as we move to stuff, it's not 100% that it will go region-wide, just depending on what the independent PSAPs are going to be doing. Governance, we have participation on the 911 MAG committees. The MAG committee leadership positions currently the PSAP managers group and current vice chair of Scottsdale. 911 oversight, current vice chair to go to chair in June is Scottsdale. And then various PSAP working group leadership. So those will need to change as PSAPs leave. We do have working groups that don't impact, that don't require, like the budget that requires a vote on it. We do have that we don't have non-members on, but we invite the working groups to still continue with us. The independent PSAPs continue to work with us on emerging technology and training and public awareness and things like that, because that's universal no matter what system you're on. So we still want their input, but anything that requires governance or budget where it requires a vote and through the MAC process, we'll keep that with member agencies. Okay, and so I'm going to turn this over to Nathan to talk about the impact to member agencies annual assessment.
Yeah, next slide, please. Actually, we can go back one. So you think about number one, the governance from the previous slide and responsibilities of the PSAT managers group up to the study committee, developing that budget every year. It's not unique at MAG that we have issue areas that a subset of member agencies have ability to vote on. An example of that is on our transportation side. MAG member agencies are all of in Maricopa County, but we have a portion of Pinal County as well. And while we do the transportation planning work for both those areas, the Transportation Policy Committee is focused on where the investments of the half-cent sales tax in Maricopa County go. So when issues are voted up, those that are not in Maricopa County as MAG member agencies will step out and they will abstain from voting. So that's an example. Here, similarly, in 911, we do have MAG member agencies, and I'll use Florence as an example. They're a member agency, however, they are not part of MR 911. So it's the same similar issue when the budget moves up through the committee chain. Those members in Pinal are not supposed to be voting. So this is a conversation to be had here among those who are staying within MR 911. They're working on that budget development process. And now do those who have stepped away from MR 911, what are their roles and responsibilities within MAG committees related to 911, budget approval being one of them. So just kind of note that to be addressed going forward. In addition to those leadership positions, chair and vice chair, we saw in the Scottsdale letter, for instance, a willingness to step away from those leadership roles, given what I just said about development of budget and advancing those issues forward. So similarly, when we start backing out member agencies from MR 911, there's an impact to the annual 911 assessment here at MAG. So again, using Florence as an example, they do not pay into that assessment currently for the reasons I just noted. So we start backing out Wickenburg, Gilbert, Scottsdale, Paradise Valley, just noting that that does have an impact in terms of reallocating that assessment to the balance of those staying in MR 911. To give you an indication idea of this, for FY 24, and these are numbers still being developed, the total planning assessment is going to be, because there's population adjustments and other variables, about $274,000 with, and I'll just use an example of a larger one that's recently indicated their intent to leave, being Scottsdale. They would have paid $22,488. Gilbert would have been about $25,000. So we're seeing those about $50,000 right there with those two being backed out. Wickenburg and Paradise Valley, much smaller dollar amounts, but that will have to be redistributed to the balance of member agencies. So just don't want that to be lost. In particular, as right now, we're in our budget development process here at MAG. So just want to note that. Also, I want to note too, with the consultant work going on, that was something that was approved by all member agencies for work that's ongoing now. We as staff are seeing and would suggest that cost, because we were going to add that into FY24 to recover some of that overage, be applied to all member agencies, because that's what all member agencies approved at that time when the work started. So just noting that one as well. Did I miss anything?
One other part of this challenge is some of the member agencies will not leave by the end of the fiscal year. And so we have to figure out how we're going to recoup the cost of that management until they do leave. And so we're working with our fiscal to determine how that would be effectively managed. Like one of them's not leaving until October. So they'll be in the system for at least 3 months, maybe or 4 months. And so the cost of managing that is still being borne by the region in that interim period. And so we need to figure out how to manage that in the assessments, especially as we see that some of the dates are slipping. And so it needs to be somewhat flexible how we would manage that assessment.
So with that, co-chairs, I think that's all we have. A lot to unpack there. We're open for any discussion, questions, comments.
Okay, any questions by members of the committee? Dan.
Thanks, Chair. Will there be any savings to the region with these agencies leaving? Obviously, whatever costs directly benefit those agencies will go away and we won't request those grants from the state. But from a day-to-day operational cost, are we going to see any savings, or is it just 100% redistributed to the remaining groups?
So the cost will go down. So our grant amount will go down because not only of their projects, but there's a monthly stipend of their networking that goes into their PSAPs and the annual support for their equipment. So those are the costs that we'll lose. But unless I'm surprised by the state, they will be taken away from our grant, and the opportunity to redistribute won't be there.
Maybe just clarify the amount. There's like a baseline expense load just to run the system, right? And that's not becoming any less expensive to run with these groups leaving.
No.
Yeah.
I think just to clarify, most of these are not very large. And so, no, you wouldn't see the kind of operational gains from that you would much larger agencies.
Kevin.
Yeah, a couple of questions. One, I think I know the answer to this, but just with regards to the technology impacts, do we envision any impact operationally to the automatic aid system?
I'm sorry, any technical?
Any operational nuances in terms of how we administer the automatic aid with the way that now we have departing agencies that are part of that system?
As the fire department?
Correct.
No, it will basically be the same. So Glendale or Gilbert will be able to transfer to Mesa just as they do today, but it just won't be, it will be through AT&T system.
Okay. So then maybe I'll ask the question that's on other people's minds, but so much of the upgrading of equipment is reliant on the state grant process. Is there a concern going forward that the state is going to freeze out MR 911 with allocation of grant and to take those dollars and direct them to the agencies that are dealing directly with the state?
Chairman Phelps, if you don't mind, Chief Walker is going to address that in his statement because there is concerns, but I'll let him bat that for you.
You want to go ahead and address that now?
Oh, or we can do it whenever.
Okay, are you done?
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry.
So I have a question. So these are the agencies we know that are leaving with potentially, I'm sure there's more that are going to go. What's going to be the further impact with additional agencies that could be leaving beyond the 4 that are listed?
So we're looking at that through the call volume, and at what point does it make sense that that the majority of the 911 call volume, when it shifts, is kind of the pattern we're looking at. So just to give you an idea of how it's distributed throughout the region, the Phoenix sites and the Mesa sites are 63% of all the call volume in the region. So if one of the bigger PSAPs left, that would be one of the tipping points of having, that would be a question of whether or not MR 911 needs to stay viable.
Okay. So what would happen if we all decide to go join the party with everybody else? We all run to the state and say, you're right, we're going to do it your way. So now we're all competing individually at the state again. Because I don't think Mesa and Phoenix and Glendale are going to let us get slipped down to the bottom of the pile because the state's going to reward those who are breaking off from the region. Doesn't make any sense. You know, 3/4 of the population lives in 3 cities. They're going to go play the game too. So what would be the effect if we all just said, yeah, we'll blow it all up together. We all go to the region. Now it takes away this perverse incentive of thinking you can get to the front of the line by breaking up from the region. I mean, do we have any sense now what would that look like if instead of the region making an application for a grant, or I don't know, how many of us are there? How many are 24 individual applications go in? Is that, I guess that's a possibility. I mean, that's what happens across the rest of the state, I'm assuming. Are there any other regions across the state that do it just as a region like we do? And do they do it in Tucson or where else?
The difference between the regions outside of Maricopa is some of them are consolidated. So that helps a lot. So multiple agencies are with one PSAP, like in Northern Arizona and down in Southern Arizona as well. They all still apply, to my knowledge, as a region. This would be the first time that these 4 agencies are going to go individual with the state that I'm aware of.
Yeah, because I think that, you know, if that's the outcome from the state's perspective, then, you know, I guess we could all individually go to the state to get on the system, but then also those who chose to could collaborate as a region. I would say this, to your point, Nate, I believe certainly on the governance that be effective immediately. That if someone is given us notice that they're departing, we effectively immediately should replace those positions because we're in this mode making some very important decisions for the group. And if someone's not committed and in part of the group, then it doesn't make a lot of sense. So we should find a way to fill those they've been vacated as far as I'm concerned, those positions. So we should fill those positions as soon as possible for those who are still part of the region. I do think, Audrey, we need to have the consultants look at, not obviously the resourcing, the funding is not something they deal with, but as far as from a systematic standpoint of a regional system under AT&T versus individuals doing their own thing under AT&T, is there an advantage? Is there some still advantage of having regional collaboration and discussion besides resourcing? Resourcing is a whole different issue, right? That's a quandary over at the state that they're trying to push their agenda with. But from an operational, systematic providing services, could there be a distinctive manner of service and all the things you guys were talking about, whether it's not reverse 911, whether it's seeing volumes across, what is the difference between being a separate standalone system versus, and within the AT&T system, versus being still a region, still collaborating just like we do at MAG, to have the opportunity discussion and creating our own value added? What would that be for our region? What would the value added that we could enhance to a separate standalone, enterprise? Because we're not going to be able to make the decision about allocating resources. That's between that's a state policy, right? And so how we influence it, either it's going to be through MAG or it's going to be through the legislature or the governor's office. And the big populated cities are going to be in there just as fast as anybody else will be in having that conversation. Because I don't think, as much as ADO wants to play, we'll pick people off and give them to go to the front of the line, I don't think that's going to last very long. When populations show up and saying, so you're taking a population of X minus over a population of X plus plus. I think it's going to be difficult for them to sustain that. If they're using that to persuade a policy decision, that's one thing. But for the long term, I think that's a disproportionate allocation of public resources that I don't think sustains itself very long. I would also suggest that we need to look at this governance of how all these committees we have over 911. We really need to hear from consultants. I think part of the problem here is the frustration of accountability, customer service, clarity of the process. I think we could do a lot to improve kind of all these different committees we have and the reporting structure. So I think we need to really hear from, emphasis the consultants. Please give us, show us what's been done elsewhere that may be effective. And at some point, if we continue to stay as a region, regardless of whether at AT&T or XYZ system, those who stay together, I do think, to your point, Liz, and it may not be, I don't know, maybe a little clunky, but I think we need to rebrand 911, rebrand regional 911 as regional 911. And if there's others that are doing something else, they're doing something else, but they're not part of a branded regional 911 system. You need to know if you're not in that regional branded 911 system, you may not be getting the same kind of connectivity, collaboration, and value-added service that you would get being associated with it. I think we have to make that distinction because otherwise there is no motivation for us to sit at the table. We should be all running down to the Capitol and knocking on the doors of ADOA and just taking a number and all standing in line, making our case. So, Scott, I can tell you have something to say.
No, I am listening intently and agree with literally everything you said.
Any comments from that, Nate?
Just don't want to lose sight. The consultant work is ongoing, of course. And given the letters of intent to depart, we have had conversations with the consultant, finding opportunities to expedite and compress schedule. So we are working on that. Appreciate the member agencies who have signed up for interviews. We're looking to conclude those by the end of the month. And Audrey, you want to talk more about consultant?
Yes, I have all but 2 locations have at least an interview on the schedule, and a total of 8 people who I don't have on the schedule yet. I'm hoping to get some of those nailed down today. Our intent is to finish all of the interviews by March 31st. And Maricopa Region 911 is providing us with the initial spreadsheet of data on the system, which we'll provide to the consultant, but also out to the PSAPs to add the additional information that we need from them. The sooner we get that back, the more likely we are to hit an early June completion. So just continuing to move that process forward.
Okay, thank you. Oh, thank you. Santiago Rodriguez, please.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Santiago Rodriguez, Chief of Police here at Goodyear. Quick question on the interviews that actually sparked a thought with me. Will there be exit interviews being done on the agencies that are leaving? I would say in the past, there's never been something like this where agencies have left. Either will MAG or will be the consultant interviewing those people be part of the report?
Well, we are certainly including or at least requesting interviews with all of the agencies who are currently members of MR 911.
So including those who have given
including those that have given letters of intent. I believe we have interviews scheduled out in Goodyear and as well. And also with, we had Scottsdale, we've been out to Scottsdale, we haven't had everybody there, Paradise Valley. So I think everybody's on the schedule. And so I would say that at a minimum would occur. If there's some other level of communication that's required, I'm sure we could figure out some way to receive that. But I do think that the agencies are being frank with the consultant and providing them with good data. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, I was just making sure. So like here, whenever I have an employee that leaves either on good terms or bad terms, we try to do an exit. We all want to grow and learn from those opportunities. And I think that it's interesting that people are leaving big agencies that are well respected. I would like to know, as sitting on the committee, what are those reasons for it? And I think it would be beneficial in this study or in this consultant work that you're doing to instead to make things better or have those opportunities to learn from why they're leaving.
Okay. Anything else, Santiago?
Nope, that's it.
Oh, yep. Go ahead. Sorry.
I have a question about SENS.
SENS is not reimbursed to MR911 as part of the grant. Is that correct?
No, it's a line item in our budget.
It's in the MR911 budget.
Yep.
Okay.
Oh, Kevin, sorry.
So just maybe a request for maybe our next meeting. One, I guess I'd like to look at what the impacts would be to MR911 if we were to sunset that. I assume we have existing contracts in place. So at least from a high level, would like to at least understand what the impacts there are. The second, I'd like to understand kind of the AT&T pricing model to the degree that we can. So I understand what the significant components are of that budget, trying to figure out, you know, is that a regulated rate? Is that a negotiated rate? What are the factors that that drive volume to improve kind of the cost per service? If what the statement made that Mesa, Phoenix, Glendale are 75% within the MR911, that means it's probably a fairly close to half maybe of the volume in this state. I don't know that to be the case, but if we negotiated with AT&T directly, because we can concentrate that service in just a few PSAPs, which probably has some operational impacts if I'm AT&T versus providing that same service through an entire statewide system. I want to see, because I think that'll be something that as we get our recommendations from our consultant is, you know, maybe at the end of the day, it would be better for people to stay as part of the MR911, which in theory, we might could negotiate as good, if not better, contract with AT&T because of the density of calls and the, you know, kind of just the call volume itself. But I don't understand their model enough to make that kind of a statement. So if we could just look at that AT&T kind of cost structure, how they do their rates, and maybe an assessment as to whether that puts us in a better or weakened position of going against a state contract.
Audrey, would any of that have been covered? Does the consultants get to that granular of a look when they're looking at systems?
I don't believe it got to that level of budget analysis.
Okay, that's fine.
More operational. They are. We have one of them here and one online, so they are listening to the discussion today. So some of these items I will discuss with them, but I do think that that's probably a little more granular than we requested.
Okay, I'm just curious. Yes, go ahead.
Can I just ask one more clarifying question? I'm still trying to figure out on the SENS. So if it's part of the MR911 budget, but it doesn't go for the grant, is it MAG or MR911 that covers that?
It's covered by the grant.
It is covered by the grant.
By the state funding. We were able to, the state approved that when we went to a grant process.
Okay. Oh, yes, Nick, go ahead.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, just nature of the timing of these conversations. Obviously, with his statements of intent from Scottsdale and Paradise Valley here in the past under 2 weeks or so, really prompted this conversation. This was not intended to jump ahead of PSAP Managers Committee or the 911 study or the 911 oversight team, but felt important to have it for this conversation today, but also looking forward in the month of April with our policy committees. I think we're recommending an update to the MAG Management Committee and also MAG Regional Council. This issue has been kept at the Management Committee, this group, and technical committees to date. But with these departures, and we're open to discussing this, Mr. Chairman, but feel as though we should be letting our policymakers know about this as well.
Yeah, my recommendation that immediately those positions have been vacated, as even per their own letters, and that once they decide to go on their own, they should be, I mean, they're going on their own. So but we need individuals that are right now trying to work towards a, you know, group discussion and decision about where we should go as a region. And it may be in the same place they're going to be, but we don't know that yet. So I think we need to get those positions need to be replaced as soon as possible. And I don't know who makes that final decision, but if there's a committee or maybe there's too many committees, but we need to get somebody to make that decision as soon as possible.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we'll work that out.
Okay. All right, seeing no other discussion on that item, we'll now move to item number 5. Do we have any updates from our PSAP managers group?
No, we don't have anything today.
Thank you. How about our MAG 911 Oversight Committee? Scott?
I do, yes. I had prepared a kind of a summary for everyone, so I'll read that and then answer any questions afterwards, Mr. Phelps. So thank you, Chairman Brady and Chairman Phelps, for this opportunity. So I wanted to provide the group a briefing on 2 separate meetings that recently myself and Ms. Graber attended with representatives from ADOA, the Strategic Enterprise Technology Office. Representatives included from the state, Lisa Marshall, J.R. Sloan, Michael Gurr, and Travis Jensen. This meeting occurred after the state had reached out offering to meet with MR911 to discuss the upcoming FY24 notice of funding for the 911 system here in the state of Arizona. So the meeting occurred on March 9th. In this meeting, the state presented an overview of the grant parameters that would be utilized for this year's grant. They explained that for MR911, there would be 2 6-month grant periods versus the 1-year period for the rest of the state. This structure was to allow jurisdictions currently included in the MR911 system an opportunity after the first 6 months to move to the AT&T managed service model if they so chose. So for the first 6 months, as they outlined, first 6-month period, MR911 would be permitted to submit for funding to support the network costs, personnel, maintenance, and administrative costs. Administrative costs are capped by the state at 1.79%. And only projects that were currently approved in this fiscal year that will carry over into next fiscal year would be approved. So no new projects would be approved for the region in fiscal year 24. Then into the second 6-month period, as they began to outline that the only funding that would be approved would be network costs and personnel costs, administrative costs, maintenance costs would not be allowed. As you may realize quickly upon hearing this, I raised the issue immediately that this would in fact defund MR911 as it would not provide any funds for staff or any costs other than network costs. And we would not be able to operate the system as January 1 of 2024. The discussion on this point continued without resolution, and we agreed to meet again the following day. So on March 10th, again, Ms. Graber and myself met with the same representatives from the state. Ms. Marshall opened the meeting with acknowledgement that the language regarding the second 6-month portion of the grant that outlined that MR9 would not be funded for personnel, maintenance, or administrative costs was probably not worded the best, and that wasn't her intent. She agreed to remove that language from the official notice that would be released in a few days. And she left open how MR911 would be funded in that second 6-month period at that point. After Ms. Marshall's comments, I posed the question to the group, and I quote, "Are we having the correct discussion? Is the real issue that the state is unwilling or unable to fund the existing MR911 model?" The group appeared to appreciate the question. While they did not fully acknowledge that this was the issue, they did acknowledge that it may not make sense to fund MR911 if the state can offer the same service. I then proposed to the group that the state commit to funding the MR911 model as it exists today for the entire fiscal year 2024. This would ensure that the region would be supported and would allow for transition period if the decision to migrate to the AT&T managed service model is made after the study committee and the consultant returns their information back to us, and we so decided to move that direction. Ms. Marshall listened and stated that she would discuss this further with her leadership. No decision was made at that time. We then discussed a few other items, which included the status of the current amendment request for different projects currently working, MR911 is working on, and the involvement in the current ComTech project. For clarification, the ComTech project is the project the state awarded a contract to that is part of the process to provide to either MR911 or to AT&T the additional information that is part of the delivering the NG911 services to a PSAP. As a reminder, this contract was awarded. MR911 was included in the contract, but the state paused our involvement in that project, thus not allowing us to deliver NG911 services to our region at this time. We had been actively testing and we're ready to deploy at the end of last calendar year, beginning of this current calendar year, but we're still paused at this time. So we continue discussions on that and how that might move forward. And then we, after a few other discussions about some other operational issues and really just kind of housekeeping items, we ended the meeting and then agreed to meet again in 2 weeks and to continue collaboration on those items and try to continue to work together, state and MR91, to deliver services to our region. So just a final piece, the grant submission period did officially open today according to the notice that went out. In that posting, it does have the 2 6-month periods for MR91. There are still questions raised in the language, how MR91 will be funded or what level of funding we will receive. One of the significant questions and issues that came up last fiscal year was that the state, for the first time, viewed maintenance costs, so personnel that support our network and our system, they viewed those as administrative costs. The state regulates administrative costs at 1.79%. So that, including our staff, which are maintenance in that administrative costs, put us over the allotment by the state. That was something that we worked through last year. They did allow us to continue to fund those positions, but that appears to be the case again in the language that they're going to view those as administrative costs. So that will be a challenge we'll have to continue to work through. The issue and problem is obviously AT&T includes maintenance costs and personnel costs in their service, but they have a contract with the state to deliver the service as an entire whole, where we are being break down our model, and maintenance costs and network costs are individually line items. So it appears they're different. Obviously, I think we all know AT&T has personnel and maintenance costs to support their system built within their pricing structure. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions. And Mr. Phelps, any questions you might have.
So Scott, is just from that, you can come away with that thinking that it's the state's intention to essentially dissolve Regional 911 as a entity that is submitting and trying to, propose inside of their budget process, grant process. And that would be it sounds like that's almost like their intent is to try to get, and are they ready to take on all 24 communities all at once? Is that your thinking is what they're trying to do? But otherwise it's either that or they're trying to just make the MR911 just have to go off on its own and fund itself and get carved out of their funding process, or they're trying to say, well, we don't like the fact that you're set up as a region. We just want to deal with you one-on-one. What's your, or something in between all of that?
So my sense, and certainly this is my sense and my opinion from being involved in these meetings and over the last several years, is that there is a funding challenge for the state. We can see the tax revenues collected. We can see the trajectory as far as cost for the state, and we can see where MR91 fits in there. So it doesn't appear to be necessarily a sustainable model overall without generating other revenue sources. Obviously, saving money on MR911 and our costs is, I don't want to say necessarily an easy place, but an opportunity for them to save money. Again, the state obviously offers AT&T service. They believe that's a service that is comparable to what is delivered by MR91. So in their mind, why would you fund both? And they acknowledge those things. And so I think it's, if we are not a region, we do not need a network. We do not need maintenance costs. That would save the state probably some, $2 to $4 million potentially in all costs. Do not know exactly what the AT&T cost increase would be to the state, because I haven't seen it broke down in the contract, so I can't say what that would be, what the true delta or the net impact would be for the state. But I do believe that there is a significant cost issue. I do believe they have a model that they believe is sufficient at a minimum, and they're challenged with this region.
Okay, thank you. Oh, Dan, go ahead.
Sorry, something crossed my mind. Maybe you know the answer to this. So based on that answer, it sounds like the state believes the cost per capita or cost per operator, however that looks, is less with the AT&T model than the regional model. Is that a fair statement?
Chair, that is a fair statement.
Is it true? I mean, does it cost us more to operate per individual operator in the region than it does AT&T? And is it justified if it is more? Because there's a pretty fair argument. The state says we can provide the same service on a pro rata share. It's less expensive. I mean, what's the justification to continue to operate a more expensive network? And I'm not trying to be an antagonist. I'm just trying to understand.
So, Chairman Brady, to that question is, I cannot tell you objectively it is more or less expensive, our model. I can tell you that the maintenance costs, for our personnel is about $2.5 million. I do not know and cannot tell you what AT&T will charge increase to the charge or to the state or to each of our agencies or us as a region if we were to enter a contract as a region, as Chairman Brady had mentioned. So really do not have information. Those are all great questions and questions we would love to entertain and assess. It's just that that opportunity has not come to us to have those discussions.
But Dan, to your point, I think it's a great point. And I don't know that it's fair to say consultants are going to get us all the way there to answer that specific question, but they're going to put on the table first the question of the technology of the system is, what's the best of practice out there that we can look at for our region. And then I think that'll help us then decide, okay, what are we going to pay for, right? Is what the state's offering, is that check all the boxes that puts us best in class with, whatever peer cities that they're choosing, then that's one conversation. But to me, that's one conversation about the technology in the system. And the other conversation is about how resources get allocated. Because I think the state thinks that they want to try to leverage the decision about systems with their budget. And maybe they think they know best, and maybe they do. But I don't know that I think that's why we're meeting here, is to come and get, because I don't remember that process. I don't remember that evaluation. I don't remember somebody asking us or having consultants come out and meet with me and my PSAP manager and say, hey, how are things going? Where do you want to go next? All I heard is, like I heard 6 years ago from the state, hey, CenturyLink's the best thing that you ever saw. And here we are 6 years later, hey, AT&T is the best thing you ever saw. So I think that's why we're going through a process. We may end up there, but I think we're going to end up there, I think, hopefully with the information, the background that we need to make an informed decision and not just have, a state agency tell us that. Does that make sense, Dan?
It does. Thank you. And I'm just curious if the state has anticipated how their budget would handle the three big ones moving over, for example.
All of us. Everybody.
Could
we just
would
say
their model scale?
Tomorrow we're all sending we're going to see Scottsdale, and that's us. Right. And we go. I think it'd be a lot of fun. See what happens.
And Chairman Brady, if I could add to the question, obviously there's cost and there's service. I think we have enjoyed for 2 decades a very attentive group that when our needs arise, quick response, someone monitors our system 24/7. And so I think there's obviously value to that. And it has been my position, as I've shared with my city leadership, where we're at, obviously Phoenix being the most at risk because we handle the most 911 calls in the state, is that all I'm saying is that we need to let this consultant and the study committee do its work. We should make our decisions based on objective facts. We should know what we're saying we're going to do. And by offer to the state or recommendation that they fund the region for a year to allow us to get that information, to know we can continue to operate, and then develop a plan to transition if that's the decision this region goes, that to me is the smart path for us and protects us and limits our risk. As I told the state, if we have an outage and we lose 10 minutes of coverage in Maricopa County or in Phoenix PD, that is an international story. That is an international story. A PSAP that sees 3 calls an hour, 3 calls a day, that probably will not be an international story. I can assure you, Phoenix PD goes down, that is an international story. I want to make sure we are my goal is to protect every one of you as city managers, my city manager, and our residents that live in this community. And that is all I've asked. And let us come back. And if we decide that is the best option to do this and deliver a better service to this region, I will be the first one to champion and say it's a better service.
Well, and here's the other thing, Scott, you're being a major metropolitan city. If it goes down, you're not going to be able to call and say, oh no, that was the governor that did that. That wasn't us. That was a state agency that did that. That's not us. There's no way, Dan, that we're going to sign a third-party contract, I don't care with the state, whomever, and not have backups to that backup that are internal, right? You wouldn't do that. You would have to you can't allow that to happen because there will be, well, why didn't you plan for AT&T to go out? Because it's happened in other major cities. I know them. They've told me about it. I can tell you about cities. Not that it's dramatic. It happens to systems, any system, right? But it happens. So, Kevin.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So thank you, first of all, Scott, for the extra information. For me, again, trying to understand the AT&T model. I also want to look at kind of what our quality approach has been from a resiliency redundancy perspective, because there may be a delta there where the base system gives you X, but we know that here in the region, we're committed to really having a seamless, as much as we can, a flawless system. I know from our perspective in Glendale, I would always be supportive of paying extra incremental amount if it meant getting and maintaining the quality of the network. Look, I was in Pierce County when CenturyLink twice was fined by the federal government for having significant outages with almost zero communication back to the PSAPs up in Washington State. I don't know how it affected down here. So I go into this a little bit, nervous because at the end of the day, my citizens will want to have nothing but a flawless system. They will never accept an excuse that somebody, their life or their situation was put in peril because of the system going down. So as much as we can identify kind of our MR 911 approach, which I think has been always dedicated towards quality over pricing, to first and foremost, give us best of quality and resiliency in our system. If we have to pay an incremental amount, if we have to go to a different model, I think I'd like to be able to identify what that would look like. So we're comparing apples to apples on this. That's just from my perspective. I don't know how Phoenix and Mesa would look at it as other major partners in it, but well, I don't want to go backwards in terms of the quality of the system. Every significant failure in this country over the last 10 or 15 years from an emergency management perspective, every one of them, if you go back and read the reports, it's always number one problem, communications. I mean, it's the failure of communications. There is no excuse, and it cost a lot of bureaucrats and elected officials their jobs when it didn't work right. So anyway, I'm probably rambling on more than I need to be, but I want to make sure we continue to stay focused on MR 911's quality and its service level, because for me, I don't want to go backwards on that, even if it means I have to take on an associated increase in cost. Sure. I'll gladly pay that and then to go backwards.
Yes, sir.
Chair Brady, Scott, quick question. It seems that AT&T is able to package their technical cost into their proposal. Do we have that same option to package ours into a service proposal so it's not broken out as administrative cost? Just seems that we're being asked to do something different than the other vendors being asked to do. And should we put ours in the same service cost?
Chairman Brady, Mr. Cooper, I'm thinking the same way. Liz and I just talked about that last week to see if there's a way we could package that up. The state does dictate the terms to some degree, but we were talking about trying to present it as such. So this would not be a challenge for us or an issue.
Yeah, we should be on equal footing when that gets reviewed.
A good comparison should be, yeah, that's a very good point.
And one other question probably for Nathan, but this seemingly is a significant revenue problem. It seems like if we had enough revenue, we may not be in the same conversation. I don't know for sure. Has there been any efforts from MAG, or I know even from our lobbyists and other groups, we've been trying to go to the state to look at that excise tax. And I know it's not a popular position right now, but this seems to be a significant revenue problem that's putting us into this quandary right now as to what we're deciding to do with this.
Yeah, thank you. Co-chairs, Mr. Cooper, we revisit this conversation from time to time. I think even at the state, there's probably a sympathetic ear, if you will, among staff in terms of the funding challenges. We've seen, I believe Arizona is probably the lowest state in the country in terms of our tax for 911 statewide. And I think there's an opportunity too, when the tax was lowered in the 2000s and this kind of rise of cell phones coming online, intuitively it was thought, okay, we're still going to grow our revenue stream with more coming online, phone lines coming online. However, that's not happened. So we've kind of been flat in our revenue. I think there's an opportunity to talk to ADOA, ADOR in terms of how that tax is captured and making sure that we are capturing everything. So I think there's an opportunity there.
All right. I don't see any other requests to speak. Audrey, go ahead.
I was just going to add to that part of the consultant project is to look at the funding models for the peer agencies. So we will be collecting at least some information relevant to that.
Thank you. All right. No other comments on that. Item 7 is request for future agenda items. Kevin's kind of expressed some of that you've taken note of. Any other comments? All right. Are they item 8, any comments or announcements from the membership? If not, we'll adjourn. Our next meeting will be on April 17th